All right, boys. Well, good talk on the Minnesota Wild there, and we'll see what happens in the state of hockey because those fans are getting impatient, and those guys on that team as well. They have not had a lot of playoff success. They've been one of those teams kind of in the middle for a long time, and they've been out in the first round every year, it seems like. So we'll move on from Minnesota now to yours, Chad. I know you have a team that you've chosen and an honorable mention as well. So let's hear it.
Yeah. So just in general, like the teams that we're talking about here are teams with playoff aspirations who have completely fallen short at this time, creeping up on American Thanksgiving. Like you said, Harper, alluding to that stat, if you're out of the playoffs by 4 or more points at this time, then it's going to be pretty tough for you to end up making the playoffs. And that's where the Nashville Predators sit right now, is outside of the playoffs with not a very good chance of making it by the numbers. And this is a team who made a lot of offseason moves to get better, to get more competitive, and to give their star players and core group of players 1 or maybe 2 more chances at competing for the playoffs and maybe doing some damage. So I have the Nashville Predators as a team who, the panic button might be pressed in that town. And I wanted to say this. They have the same exact record as the Minnesota Wild, who we just talked about, 14 points in 17 games played. I did the quick math. If we're saying that the magic number to get in is about 93 points, last year, the Panthers, I think, had 92, but then in the West, the cutoff was 95. So it's in the middle somewhere. I'm saying the magic number is about 93 points to get in this year in the West. If that's the case, the Preds and the Wild will both need 79 points in their next 65 games to make the playoffs. And I don't know if you're doing the math there, but that's about 40 wins in that span. And I don't know if I see that happening for either teams, but specifically here for the Nashville Predators. Look, like they just haven't been scoring as much as a team who wants to compete for the playoffs. Their goaltending, which has historically been extremely good, of course, going from a goalie like Pekka Rinne to their current starter, UC Saros, their goaltending has been a staple of this team forever. But this season, it's kind of crazy because UC Saros ranks dead last in the league in terms of goals saved above expected on Money Puck. And that's just not good enough. It shows how important he is to that team. And it shows how average and even below average this team is without him performing at the best of his abilities. So it's just not good enough. Outside of Philip Forsberg, they really don't have any bright spots for them this year. I mean, you can argue Ryan O'Reilly has had a bit of a resurgence, but I think that's just a product of him playing like 18 minutes a night on the first line. And if you go around the league, like I don't think Ryan O'Reilly is a first line caliber center anymore on most teams, yet he's tasked with that in Nashville. So overall, things just have not been going well for this team. And I don't know. I think I'm pressing the panic button. I don't think the Preds have a chance in hell to make the playoffs during a year where, Casey, like you mentioned off air before we started here, during a year where, they probably had a pretty good chance because there are some other struggling teams in the West.
Yeah, we were looking for someone to really grab the bull by the horns with Edmonton struggling. St. Louis is streaky at times. Nashville, Minnesota, Calgary, all these teams kind of struggling. It's just been like a distribution of wealth that's been kind of equal, other than maybe Vancouver. But I think that they were just a playoff team in the first place. But when I look at Nashville, I actually think I like their odds more than the Minnesota Wild at this time, because Saros being last in goal save above expected is such, an anomaly. Like it's an outlier. It's not supposed to happen. And I have faith in turning this around, and then that's going to be huge for this team. When you look at kind of the distribution of goals, their expected goals percentage, they're 5th in the league. They're actually expected to be outplaying teams every night, but it's just really not working out for them. And then the goaltending's hurt them. What worries me a little bit is the depth of this team, it's all one line scoring right now. After Forsberg, O'Reilly, Nyquist, and Yossi, Novak's been pretty good as well. But after that, it falls off a cliff. And, I don't think that's any shock to NHL fans because that's been Nashville in a nutshell. Goal scoring's always been a struggle, and it's always come from a handful of players. But I think when you look at some of the underlying stats, like things point to Nashville, they should be better. And goaltending is one of those things I think will correct itself, maybe more so than the Minnesota Wild. So these two teams for the rest of the season are going to be interconnected in my mind, and it's going to be funny to watch it play out. But yeah, it's annoying that they want to give this team one last shot or maybe two, and this was the year to do it. You have so many teams just playing with 500 hockey in the West. This is when you needed to jump up and grab a wild card spot, but they've failed to do that so far.
Well, because then the alternative case, if it's not this year or next year, Nashville could be selling. They could be recouping assets for some of their good players. UC Saros is a guy who, again, like we've mentioned, is a really good goaltender in the prime of his career, who has historically been really good and put up great underlying and service level numbers, and cheap. Could be a very valuable trade asset for them. So, it's that old adage, go to the bathroom or get off the pot. And they haven't been doing it.
Was this PG?
I'm trying to, Case, I'm see if we can get some kid viewers, all right? And then maybe they won't be offended if I say go to the bathroom instead of shit. I said it anyway, so there we go. But, okay, so I wanted to actually push back on something you said, though, Case. They are generating a decent amount of scoring chances, but they're not finishing. Usually that tells you either a team's been unlucky or they just don't have finishing talent. For this Nashville Predators team, I think it's the latter. I just don't think they have the finishing talent. I think when Philip Forsberg is your only guy who can score goals, really, I just don't think it's good enough. And I would have to look at the numbers, but I feel like this has been a trend for Nashville. They're able to generate because historically they've been pretty, they've had some size on their team and they've been able to hold the puck and get shots on net, and they've been well coached over the years too. But then, they just don't have any guys who can actually score. I think that's been their tale over the last few seasons. So I don't know if I see their scoring going up that drastically. And I feel like I have more faith in a team like Minnesota, who has absolute killers, even though they're handicapped by the cap.
I can hear that argument, and statistically that makes sense to me. But another the third layer to this, the deeper dive of it, is the guys who are scoring below expected are Nyquist, Cody Glass, and Parsonen. So it's those are, two of those guys I expect to finish. I expect them to pull it out. Cody Glass still has the potential there. We're borderline on calling him the bust word or what, but I still think that he should be a guy who can finish. And Gustav Nyquist has finished in the past. He's really exceeding in the playmaking role with 9 primary apples this season. But if the expected goals were coming from guys like maybe a Liam Foudy or a Stastny, or I'm just reading off names at this point. If it was coming from guys
who played for that team,
I don't really expect to be scoring, then that would make sense to me. But I think the guys who are missing the net are guys who should be scoring. And then the guys who are scoring above expected, like a Kiefer Sherwood or a Fabro, I mean, the pendulum swings to what side of the argument you're on.
Yeah, fair enough. How good would an Eli Tolvanen look on this team for depth scoring? Wouldn't that be nice, guys? I mean, he only has 12 points through 20 games with Seattle, but just another guy who can put the puck in the net and would be nice depth scoring for this team.
Yeah, that's tough. He's fit well in Seattle since the day he got there, that's for sure. But talking about the Predators, we knew that scoring would be an issue for them Tommy Novak is obviously injured right now, and we knew it was going to need to be up to the big guys in Forsberg and O'Reilly, and some of their younger players taking a step. And Novak's hurt, as I mentioned. He's certainly one of those good young players, but a guy like Luke Evangelista has struggled, and he was a healthy scratch by Andrew Burnett the other night. And I mean, they're a good enough blue line, and Saros is having a rough start, but I mean, he is an elite goaltender in the NHL. We've seen that for years now, and this is an outlier that he's last in goals saved above expected. But gone are the days, as we've said before, of winning games 2-1 and 3-2 and 1-0 and that. So even though Nashville has a good blue line, I think a better blue line than the Minnesota Wild, safe to say, and the better goaltender out of the two. But just the support and the depth just isn't quite there. I mean, that was a hell of a comeback against the Colorado Avalanche the other night. I'm sure you guys saw the end of that, where they had 2 quick goals in the dying seconds by Forsberg and Trennan, but you can't count on those heroics every night. So we knew that scoring would be an issue for Nashville, but they're kind of one of these teams that are trying to retool on the fly, I feel like a St. Louis and some of these other teams, trying to continue that momentum that they had to finish the year last year, where they kind of sold at the deadline, but they were playing meaningful games late in the year, and I don't know if we'll get that now.
Now when sorry, we just learned something on Riverside, I guess. When you say the retooling efforts of this team, I will give them some respect there, because you bring in Ryan O'Reilly, who's really worked out on this team, and you bring in McDonough, who the McDonough-Carrier line, I was looking on Money Puck on D pairings. That's a very good pairing. It's worked out for them, even more so than the Yossi Fabro line or pairing. So they've done a decent job at retooling. I don't know if it was a team that needed retooling. I think they might have needed a rebuild. So, props for trying, but it's failed so far.